Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are the Harvard Federal Credit Union, and this will be a presentation on retirement and building a comfortable lifestyle for tomorrow. As you're joining us, please feel free to join in, and no rush. We will be getting started shortly. But first, in today's webinar, we will be reducing all background noise. So whatever is going on right now, whatever you're eating lunch, if you have your kids or a dog barking, no worries at all. You're already muted. Feel free to listen. And if possible, please ask questions as well using the Q&A feature. Please let me know it's working by letting us know where you are joining us from, whether it is far out in sunny California or here in wintry, cold Massachusetts, where we're getting a nice cold front right now, or somewhere in the middle in Utah or Ohio, let us know. We'd love to hear where our members are from. Also, this presentation will be recorded, so if you are not able to see the full presentation, that is completely okay. We will be following up with an email afterwards and sending you the full recording, as well as a post-workshop survey that will be at the end of this presentation. Please let us know how we did. We read all feedback, and we love to improve. This webinar was hosted by myself, Terrence Bazil, a communication specialist, along with my manager, Jen Fries, and my colleague, Ty Robinson, who will be in the background and helping me with anything and everything that goes wrong and or right. Oops, this way. And a little bit about Harvard FCU. We are not-for-profit banking. We are a community-focused financial institution with plenty of products and services to meet all of your banking needs, and we are accessible anywhere. We have convenient locations. And one more thing, when you are a member for life, and your membership extends to all of your family members. So please, if you are curious or want to learn more, feel free to stop by at one of our locations or send us an email. We have our information that will be following this presentation on the end slide, where you can follow us on our socials and reach out to us if you have any questions at all, as well as Raj's email, which will be coming up shortly. So, meet the presenter, the star of the hour, Raj. He's an investment advisor for QSO. A little bit about him. He's been a financial advisor with over 25 years of experience. Um, he is originally from West Hartford, Connecticut, attended Northeastern University, and works as a supervisor in event operations for the Boston Red Sox at Fenway. And in his free time, Raj enjoys playing guitar and traveling. So honestly, Raj sounds like an amazing man, very experienced, very accomplished, and also personally, he's a pretty cool dude. I like hanging out with Raj. Raj, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Terrence. Thanks for your kind words. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. So, yeah, we're here to talk about retirement planning, and how you can take these steps to make sure you have a comfortable lifestyle in retirement. And so, one of the first things we always talk about is, when you think of retirement, like, what do you see? Everyone's got different hobbies, different interests, different wants in retirement, but like, how do we make sure you can continue living the lifestyle or enjoy the lifestyle you want in retirement when you're no longer working, right? So retirement's always um, the way we see it, a celebration of what you've done over the course of your career, right? So like, some people want to just not do anything. Some people just want to travel.
I'm
I,
definitely one of those people. I
yeah,
just want to travel and I don't want to work.
yeah, right. So, and these are all good things. There's no right or wrong answer, right? But how do you fund your lifestyle when you're not working, right?
Hmm.
So, um, I know, Terrence, you had mentioned you want to travel. Like, what does that look like for you when you think about what your retirement looks like? Like, when do you want to retire? Is it 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now?
Ideally, it would be 10 years from now, but however, I have some time. I am just under 30 years old, so I have
Okay.
30 more years of working. So I have pretty much a good amount of time ahead of me to start saving. And
Yeah.
the goal is once I'm done, I want to travel the world. I'm backpacking. I'm going to be eating great food, trying new things, and not worrying about logging into Zoom to do these presentations anymore.
Well, that sounds like the perfect retirement.
Oh,
And you had
yeah.
mentioned, your time frame, 30 years, and another key word there is savings. You have plenty of time to save, right?
Hmm.
So, um, that's great. Like, the longer you have to plan for these things, the more chances of success you have, right? But there's never a right time or a wrong time to start, as long as you start, right? And a lot of the questions I get from people is, well, I'm dealing with so many different things in my everyday life. I've got children, I've got school, I've got work. Um, I want to enjoy my life while I'm still working as well, right? So
Hmm.
these are all priorities, and I understand that, but you have to make retirement a priority as well, right? So as you eloquently stated, you have time, but you know, whatever that time frame is, you still need to make a plan, and that's what we want to do is help you make that plan.
So speaking of plan, I see that we have three keys to funding a comfortable retirement. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about those keys and what we'll be seeing further in the presentation, Raj?
Yeah, so exactly what we're saying. Like when you close your eyes, like what do you see your retirement lifestyle look like? Like I look at, so I'm 52. I plan to work until I'm 80 because I enjoy what I do. I like helping people. Um, so
You don't look 52, by the way, Raj. You look
thanks.
25.
All right. That's all the help I'm getting from the cameras and everything, right? So
There you go.
but yeah, but like if you want to retire at 40, if you want to retire at 50, if it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, you just kind of have to have a plan. Like, so as we said, what does retirement look like for you? Do you buy a house on the Cape? Do you travel elsewhere, or do you continue like working, just not as much, right? So you got to figure out what those needs are. And then once you know what those needs are, and it's never going to be perfect, right? So if you're working with the right person, or if you're doing it on your own, like as long as you kind of have an idea, like what you want is like a roadmap to get you to your destination, right? So as long as you have an idea, you can veer off course, but you still want to have a basic idea of what you want retirement to look like. And then from there, you develop a strategy, right? Is it savings in a bank account and a checking account, if that's going to be enough? Or is it putting money in like your 403B plans or 401k plans, like any of those retirement plans? Or is it saving outside of those plans because you might need more money than what they allow, right? So develop a strategy. So evaluate your needs, develop a strategy. And then once you start accumulating and growing those assets, however you're doing it, you want to start protecting it, right? Because um, as you said earlier, if you have time, you can overcome a lot of things. But if that time gap is narrowing, you got to start protecting, right? So you want to know, like, if I'm going to retire at 65, do you want to be, and we'll talk about this later, like in an all aggressive portfolio when I'm 58, right? So those are the questions that you need to ask yourself. Those are the things that you need to talk about. And those are the things that, we can help you plan with. But so basically evaluate your needs, develop a strategy, protect your nest egg because you don't want to lose what you worked so hard for.
So speaking of that, Raj,
Yep.
as we're getting to get into the meat and potatoes of things,
Yep.
let's talk about some of the factors that influence my retirement income needs, because there's a few different things when it comes to income that I'm be mindful of in my retirement, because I definitely do not want to have to go back to work. I made that super clear. So I want to make sure I have
Right.
enough money. Tell me more about that, Raj.
Yeah. So these are a lot of the factors that will influence what you need in retirement, right? So retirement age, that's key, right? So um, it used to be the old adage was 59 and a half, then 65. Uh, those are all just numbers. You know, let's say I go out and win the Powerball tomorrow and I have $500 million in my bank account. Well, I can retire tomorrow, right?
Hmm.
That shouldn't be a problem. Well, I probably won't, but so your retirement age comes into play, right? Because what's going to happen is if you're 30, like you are, Terrence, and you work till 62, that's 32 years of income for you, right? Someone else is paying you to help fund your lifestyle, right? So in those 32 years, um, that makes a big difference. If it's 65, that's another 3 years, right? So 35 years of income coming in, right? So having that retirement age makes a big difference, right? So one, you should know, like, have an idea of what that retirement age is going to be, and then length of retirement is another factor, right? So if you retire at 65, average life expectancies for men right now is 80, around 85, 86. For women, it's around 88, 89. Um, and as we get closer to those ages now, it's probably even going to go up, right? So if you retire at 65, right now you're looking at life expectancy of 85 if you're a man. So that's 20 years of living in retirement, right? Like, how do you fund that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then most likely with advances in medical technology and lifestyles and things like that, Um, when we get closer to 85, really, we're probably going to live to 90, right? So the expectancies are there, right? So at 65, how do you fund for another 35 years, 25 years, 20 years, right? So retirement age, retirement length, inflation. We'll talk about inflation a little bit, but that factors into your retirement as well. Um, and what inflation is, it's a measure of time on money, right? So what something might cost today, as you can see here on the graph, like milk costs $4 a gallon today. We're estimating in 20 years from now, milk will cost $7. So
I
what
hope
it
it
should be,
doesn't.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at where we were 10 years ago, so I share this story a lot. When I was in college, so 20, 30 years ago, I used to buy a 2-liter bottle of Coke for 99 cents. It would cost me a buck four every time I went to the supermarket to buy that 2-liter bottle of Coke. Now, it costs me almost $1.50 to buy a can of Coke, right? So what's changed? The product, the manufacturing, everything in that little can of Coke or that 2-liter bottle of Coke is still the same. It's inflation that is driving that up, right?
Mm,
So those costs. So like you want to make sure that the dollars you have today have purchasing power tomorrow, right? So you have to account for inflation. There's no escaping it, and we predict inflation to grow at 3% a year, right? You'll have some years where they don't, and you'll have some years where it'll exceed that, right? But inflation's got to be part of that projection when you're figuring out your retirement costs. And then another thing we look at is lifestyle, right? So
mhm,
lifestyle is, what do you want to do? Most people tend to have the same lifestyle they do while they're working in retirement. They might add a few trips here or there, or they might take more time to do their hobbies or things like that. But whatever that is, like, how do you pay for those things, right? Like you, Terrence, you want to travel.
I
Um,
do want to travel. Of
so,
course I do, man. That's all.
yeah.
That's what it's about.
So, like, depending on where you want to travel and like how you want to facilitate your lifestyle while you're traveling, right? Is it 5-star hotels or is it staying in hostels and things like that, right? So you have to have that take that into account, right? So, and then as you can see, these are possible sources of income for retirement, right? Your Social Security, if you continue to work either full-time or part-time, and things that you do outside of that, like savings and investments, right? So in your employer sponsored plans, or which we call tax deferred plans, or whatever you have like in your savings accounts, which are considered taxable accounts, right? Um, so those are some of the things that you want to consider when you're making your strategy, when you're developing your plan, and as you're talking about protecting what you have, right? So,
So you mentioned Social Security, Raj. Can you
mhm.
tell me a little bit more and go into a bit more detail about Social Security, where we can learn more and how we go about planning, and if we can even rely on Social Security in the future?
Yeah. So that's always, and that's a great question. That always comes up. There was a time, especially like 15, 20 years ago, where everyone thought um, the Social Security accounts would go bust because we were borrowing so much money against what we were trying to do. No longer do we worry about so much about balanced budgets and um, deficit spending and all that. So I still think Social Security is going to be safe because we've learned that we can borrow for what we need, right? So, but Social Security, um, all those great taxes you pay in your paycheck that come out. So, so you're making $20 an hour at the end of the day. When you get your paycheck, it comes down to $15 or $12, right? So most jobs you're paying into Social Security. That's your account, whatever you're putting into it. Um, it's going to be it's going to be there for your future, right? So you can go to if you haven't done this already, I recommend everyone to do this. You go to the Social Security website, so ssa.gov. You can register there. It'll give you like what your earnings history has been, what your projected earnings history can be, and from there, it'll tell you like what you can expect at retirement. Um, and they have three different tranches or ages. Uh, you can start collecting Social Security at 62 and a half. So when you turn 62 and a half, you can start claiming Social Security. That'll be a lesser payout. At 65, 66, that's what we call full retirement age. So if you wait to collect at 65 or 66, you'll get your full retirement package. That's for full retirement age. And then if you have the ability, To wait until 70, you get a little more. The government will pay you more to wait, right? So it's usually about 20 to 25% more than what your full retirement age is. Um, and Social Security is based on your earnings. And what they'll do is they'll calculate your five highest earning potential years, and then they'll use that formula to give you your what your monthly payout is, right? So if you go to that website, log in, as I said, most people that work will have um, access to Social Security when they retire. Um, there are things like if you work for a government, like a municipality, or if you get a pension, something like that, they might not have that, especially in Massachusetts. But as you go into those websites and pull up your account, you'll be able to figure that out. And then,
I I did
yeah,
actually go on the website, and
yep,
it
uh-huh.
wasn't a lot. I mean, I've been working for that long, but it was only like $800. I was like, I have a lot more, have a long way to go to make some more money.
Yeah, and like don't let those numbers scare you, right? You know, you do want to check it periodically, but as you get closer to retirement, and as you're making your plans, you wanna check those numbers as well. But yeah, so like I think right now, based on what I've done in my career, I'm closer to $3,000 a month. Um, but I'm hoping that changes and it goes higher as I continue to work. But yeah, but everyone's gonna have a different number. But whatever they're showing you right now is like based on what you've accumulated over years. But again, Terrence, you're young, you're still starting out. That number should go up, right?
Fingers
But
crossed.
yeah, but at the very least, if you stop working today, at age 62 and a half, you might get $700 a month. Is that going to be enough? Who knows?
Not to travel.
Yeah.
All right, so we know about Social Security, and let's look at some other ways to fund my travel plans, my retirement, which is personal savings and investments. Tell me about that,
Yeah.
Raj.
So outside of what you're doing through your employer, like I believe you have a 403(b) plan, I have a 401(k) plan. Um, the things that you accumulate over time, like from your savings, so like if you put away $15 a paycheck or $20 a paycheck or something like that, my father used to tell me, always put 10% into a savings account. Whatever you make, put 10% in, right? For the future. So either for something that's 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, or for retirement, which for many people is like 15 or 20 years down the road, right? So some of these things that you use outside of your employer sponsor plans, you can use for retirement, right? So like if you have a lot of money saved up in a checking account or savings account, well, maybe you don't need that much, right? And that's where we can talk about these things, and you can start using some of those funds as an investment, and it can be for retirement or doesn't have to be for retirement, but you're just saving for the future, right? And some of those things will help you fund your retirement, right? So again,
Mhm.
let's just say, Terrence, you retire tomorrow and your Social Security is at $1,000 a month. Is that going to be enough? Probably not. You have money in your 403(b) plan. Will that help? Maybe not. So also what you do outside of those accounts, like your savings, investments that you have outside of that, we can also use as a way to fund retirement, right? So, and that's all going to vary for people, right? But you
Mm,
can use those accounts, like taxable accounts, like savings, investment accounts, mutual funds, things like that. Then you also have your tax deferred vehicles. So as we talked about your employer sponsor plans, or if you have a Roth IRA on your own, or your IRA on your own, or some people, what we call an annuity might apply, right? So we can look at some of those things. And then as you can see here, like these are usually what happens in your employer sponsor plans. You're maxed out at $23,000 a year. And then if you're over the age of 50, you're allowed to contribute another $7,500 a year. So almost 30,500 a year for retirement. And if you're not sure how those things work, we can talk about that.
actually, that's what's coming up next, Roth contributions. So you mentioned workplace savings plan, and you did mention Roth. Can you tell me what is a Roth exactly and how I can contribute to it and what it means to have one?
Yeah, so Roth is just another vehicle that we use for retirement. So, for example, Terrence, you're contributing to your 403(b) plan. So it wouldn't make sense for you to put money into a traditional IRA because in that traditional IRA, you can't take that deduction because you're already contributing to an employer-sponsored plan. So a Roth is just another vehicle where you can put after-tax dollars into a tax-sheltered account, right? And that's a huge things to have. Um, the U.S. government, when it comes to taxes, they don't give us too many gifts, but this is a great gift. So there are some income limitations on Roths, contributions and things like that, but essentially what you're doing is whatever monies you put into a Roth IRA is going to already be taxed. And then what will happen is over that time period, so again, we'll use you as a 30-year-old, over the next 30 years, whatever monies you invest into a Roth, it'll grow tax-free, tax deferred. Um, and most likely when you start taking the money out of the Roth, if you need to take money out of the Roth, you won't pay taxes on those funds because you've already paid taxes, right? So
Mm,
you're going to get 30 years of tax deferred or tax-free growth, which is huge. And hopefully it's even longer than that because we're not going to touch that Roth for a long time, right?
that's right.
Whereas in a traditional IRA or your 403Bs, 401k plans, as soon as you start taking distributions from those accounts, you'll pay taxes, and those taxes come out as ordinary income. And the idea there is you are going to be in a lower tax bracket as at retirement. Hopefully, that's the case. So you're not paying as much in taxes as you would now. So the benefit of having a traditional IRA is um, if you leave service and you want to roll your 401k or 403b, you can put that in a traditional IRA. And there are many benefits for that, which we can talk about as well in a future discussion. But what will happen is that money will grow tax free as well. If you don't have an employer sponsor plan, or if you don't have um, a Roth IRA and you want to contribute money to a traditional IRA, you can do that, and you can take a tax deduction against your taxes on that. So again, traditional IRAs are more vehicles for people who don't have those 401ks or 403Bs. And it's a nice way for you to save for retirement because again, having that tax deferred growth is huge. Um,
And
yeah,
now let's look at one more option that we
yep,
just looked at earlier, annuities. And
yep.
I'm really interested in this. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so annuities is another great vehicle to have. So as we talked about over the years, as you're accumulating wealth in your retirement plans or outside the retirement plans, annuities are a good way to protect what you've already accumulated, right? So think of annuities as the reverse of life insurance, right? So life insurance will pay your beneficiaries a lump sum of money in case something unforeseen happens to you, right? So it's a case of you're not living long enough. The life insurance is there to take care of the ones you love. Annuities are a 180 of that. So in case you live too long, you can create an annuity for yourself where you generate an income stream that will pay you for the rest of your life. So Social Security is a way is one form of an annuity, right? So outside of Social Security, you can create your own annuities, and the money you put in there grows tax free, tax deferred. We have annuities that can protect your principal, things like that. So there are number of different ways to do it. So you can see there are fixed annuities, variable annuities, index annuities. So those are another ways to help grow those assets as well. Like a fixed annuity would be attached to like some sort of U.S. government bond or savings bond, uh, corporate bond or something like that. Variable annuities are investments, right? So like you would inside a 401k or if outside of a retirement plan, like if you have a mutual fund or ETF account, something like that. So those variable annuities will be attached to some sort of investment. Then the index annuity is something that's attached to an index, like an S&P 500 or a NASDAQ um, 3000 or something like that. So those are all investments, right? But the
Mm,
beautiful thing about annuity is most of them, once you put a lump sum in, will protect that principal, and then we can have those assets grow within a tax deferred shelter. And then if you need to turn on an income stream, once you turn on that income stream, you're going to get basically a paycheck for life, however you want to do that, right? So the annuity is
wow.
a great tool for retirement, but you want to look at those as your, you know, getting closer to that retirement age. So like maybe 10 years out, 15 years out, because you want to accumulate the assets first, then you want to start protecting the assets.
Okay. So you mentioned something about investing earlier.
Yep.
We're going to look into now three fundamental principles of investing. And I do have some knowledge about investing, but
Yeah.
diversification, asset allocation, and dollar cost averaging, I
Yep.
feel like I know what I'm doing, but I could always learn more. What do I need to know?
Yeah. So as a professional, I would think we always can learn more because things change, markets change, the environments change. So, but when you're looking at investing, the first question someone's always asking me is, should I buy Tesla? I love Tesla. Should I buy Tesla? Right. Well, yeah. Tesla, I don't want to say is a good investment or a bad investment. I don't want to skew anyone from that. But what you don't want to do is put everything you have into Tesla, right? So that's where diversification is a key thing. So you want to have different companies. You want to have what we call a portfolio of stocks or bonds, right? So um, having that diversification, right? So if you look at the recent history of Tesla, the performance hasn't been very good, right? I don't know what Elon's doing, but performance hasn't been great.
No one knows what Elon's doing these
Yeah.
days.
Um, so you want to invest in Tesla, great, but you also might want to invest in Amazon, right? Because Amazon is just kicking ass. They own the markets and everything. Like you might not believe in the big conglomerates, but Amazon, we just had Black Cyber Monday, Black Friday, Cyber Monday these past few days. Well, guess all those packages that are being shipped out most likely are coming through one of Amazon's partners or Amazon itself, right? Um, so that's what we talk about diversification, right? Like having multiple companies in an investment portfolio, right?
Mm.
Asset allocation, um, that's more like you want to be in what we call sectors, right? So like Amazon, Tesla, those are Intel, those are all considered technology, right? But then you look like at some of the big pharmas like Bristol Myers, Johnson and Johnson, right? You know, those are different sectors. So asset allocation is like having different sectors because right now technology might be doing great. It's a great sector to be invested in, but we just had an election. We have a new administration coming in. They might treat technology differently, right? So you don't want to be all technology. So like we want to look at something like financials, right? Banks will do great, I think, in the next few months because rates are coming down. The new administration will probably be a little bit more relaxed when it comes to regulation, things like that, right? So so financials is another sector, right? So that's what we talk about as asset allocation. You want to have investments that range into different sectors, right? So that's asset allocation.
Mhm.
Um,
And now
then,
one more thing about dollar
yep,
cost averaging, and then we'll move
yep,
into taxable investments.
sure. So dollar cost averaging is just you're making systematic investments into your account, right? So like your 401k or 403 plan that they use dollar cost averaging. So you're putting in a fixed amount regardless of what the markets are doing, right? So like um, your paycheck, Terrence, maybe like you're putting in 10% every paycheck, right? So whatever that comes out. So regardless of what the markets are doing, you're gonna you're gonna invest either when the markets are low or when the markets are high, but that's what dollar cost averaging is, right? You're
Awesome.
just putting in a systematic approach to it to your investments.
So as we are investing, what are
Yeah.
the different options when it comes to investing? Because I'm looking at stocks, bonds, and cash alternatives.
Yeah. So if you were just to break it down to the pure basics, um, every investment will either be a stock, a bond, or cash alternatives. And cash alternatives could be like money markets, CDs, things like that. Bonds are fixed income instruments. So when you become a lender to a corporation or to an institution or to a government like U.S. government bonds, those are fixed income. So what you're doing there is you're lending the U.S. government money, and in return they're going to pay you what we call a coupon. So like right now, if you look at the 10-year Treasury, the government will pay you 4.5% a year, so they can borrow money from you, right? So
Hmm.
that's the fixed income, right? So that's what bonds are. That they're a little bit more stable because you know at maturity you're going to get back your principal. So like, let's just say you put $10,000 into a bond. When the bond comes due in 10 years, you're going to get your $10,000 back plus whatever interest you accumulate over time, right? So those tend to be a little bit more stable. Then you have stocks. Stocks, you become an owner in that. in that corporation, right? So like we talked about Tesla, I talked about Amazon, Apple. Like you can go out on the exchanges and invest in those companies. You become an owner of those, and that's how you record it. You buy stock or you invest in those companies' stocks, right? So,
Hmm.
um, or also we call it equities. So you have equities. You have an equity in that name.
I do
So
own some
yeah,
stocks, and I definitely do own
yeah.
some shares of Tesla. I'm not gonna
All right, that's
lie.
yeah, and that's something you want to talk about, right? If you have a long-term view, that's great. If you have a short-term view, you know,
Yeah.
it might, but so but what happens with stocks is you become part owner in that company, right? You have equity, shares, things like that, right? So whatever good happens to that company, you share, and whatever bad happens in that company, you share in, right? So
Ooh, perfect segue
yeah.
into diversification and to limit the exposure of losses.
Yeah. So again, as we talked about, um, diversification, not putting everything in Tesla, not putting everything in Amazon, not putting everything in Apple, right?
Mhm.
You want to have diversification because what will happen is so many companies will do well in certain environments, but that doesn't mean you don't want to have exposure to other companies, right? So like for example, um, under Biden administration, the big oils, they probably didn't do all that well, right? Because the administration was more green, looking for different ways to reduce big oil, right? Exposure to big oil, carbon emissions, and things like that, right?
Mhm,
But
mhm.
that doesn't mean you didn't want to own those companies, right? Like maybe you just don't have as much of an allocation into those sectors, right? But now that Trump's coming in, chances are big oil will do better, right? So that's why
Speaking
you,
of allocation,
yeah, that's why you want to have like exposure to those companies. So when there's a period when those sectors or those companies do well, you do have that exposure, so you'll participate there, right? But that doesn't mean you need to sacrifice um, technology or pharmaceutical or things like that, right? So diversification, asset allocation, you want to be well-rounded when it comes to when it comes to investing, right? So because you never know like what sector will perk up, right? So like if you look back at COVID, all of a sudden the pharmaceuticals, the biotechnologies, they took off because COVID, as we know, was a big problem, and those were the companies that were going to lead us out of that, right? So they made for great investments, right? So having exposure there was fantastic, but you also want to have exposure in the other sectors, and that's where asset allocation, diversification, all that come into play.
so let me ask you a question about
Yeah,
that. Seeing how we're both technically working, but we do have some difference in our ages,
yeah.
do we have the same asset allocation model when it comes to retirement?
Um, we shouldn't, no. So um, I wish I was back where you are right now because I would want to be a little bit more aggressive because knowing what I know about the markets, I think the next few years are going to be tremendous, right? But I
Mhm,
also need to start thinking about um, protecting my um, like what my nest egg is, right? So
mhm.
I'm probably going to scale back a little bit on the aggressiveness. But again, this is why you want to talk it out, talk to someone, because you can like for a period of time be very aggressive, right? Um, but everyone's going to have um, different ways to measure risk, right? So being aggressive, being conservative, that all depends on your makeup, right? And then your asset allocation mix um, will come
Hold
off
on.
of. Yep.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off
Yeah. No. No.
because I
No.
know you're going right into asset allocation and being
Yeah.
conservative, and I wanted to give you the slide with it too.
Yeah.
So tell me more about what it means to be conservative.
Yeah. So generally, like conservative, you don't want to take on too much risk, right? Um, I tend to be a little bit more aggressive than someone in my age group, right? But usually, what happens in a conservative portfolio, you can see in this pie chart, you have more exposure to fixed income bonds, less exposure to stocks, more cash right now, right? Because you don't want to take on too much risk. You don't want to have too much fluctuation in market values, right? Whereas in an aggressive portfolio, um, you might have more stocks, less bonds, less cash, right? Because you have time to overcome any type of pullback in the market and things like that, right? So,
Mhm.
um, but everyone should have your mix is going to be a little different, right? So what my mix is, what your mix is, what anyone in the audience, your mix will be a little different. But these are just sort of guidelines of where you are, when it comes to like conservative, aggressive, or anything that falls in between. So, and again, it'll depend on your risk and things like that. But you want to have like your time horizon and risk tolerance. Those are two key measures in how aggressive or how conservative you want to be. And again, depending on what you're planning for, you can have multiple different allocations, right?
Oops.
So um, it all it all depends. So like in a good portfolio, like if you have money that's set aside for retirement, um, you can be a little bit more aggressive because those are funds that you're not going to touch. Whereas outside of retirement, if you are planning to buy a house or making a large purchase in the next 5, 10 years, your asset allocation for those funds might be a little different, right? So, but these are things that you want to talk about with your financial professional. Something I can certainly help you with, um, and happy to do that, right? But
Very nice.
your asset allocation, your diversification, all that, that's gonna be different for everyone.
So you mentioned dollar cost averaging earlier,
Yep.
and I wanted to move forward a little bit and show this graph to show an example of what it means to actually dollar cost average and how it could affect you.
Yeah.
Um,
So as we talked about it earlier, you're just making a contribution to your investment account, like either your taxable account or your 401k, your 403b, whatever you have, right? You're just putting like the the set amount in each time, right? So in this example, they're showing you $100 a month, right? Um, I like to talk about when I was in high school, um, when I used to fill up my gas tank. Um, every week, my father would give me $20 to fill up the gas tank, right? So regardless of what the price of gas was, I only had $20. Um, so if gas was back then, like I'm gonna show you how old I am. I think I already told you how old I am,
mhm.
but so let's say I went to the pump. The gas was $2 a gallon, right? So at $20, I was going to get 10 gallons, right? Um, and there were times where gas was $2.25 a gallon, right? So even though the price went up, I only had that $20, so I'd get less than 10 gallons, right? And then there are times when I went to the pump, gas was a buck 85 a gallon, right? So I had that same $20. Well, I had $20, wasn't the same 20, but I had
Mhm.
$20, and I'd get more than 10 gallons because gas was a buck 85, right? So
And
that's
you
how
got to
you
keep
look.
the change too, huh?
Uh, yeah. Well, I got more gas, right? So
Yeah.
I can go out for more joy rides and things like that. But whatever it is, that's what so in a simple way, that's what dollar cost averaging is. You're just putting in that same amount of money regardless of what the investments are doing, right? And then again, as we talk about in especially in your employer sponsored plans, 403bs or 401ks, you benefit when the markets pull back because you'll eventually be investing in good equities or good bonds at a lower rate. And then if you're investing as prices move up or as the markets move up, you're still investing, right? You're going to realize those gains hopefully 10 years from now, 15 years from now, right? So, but you're just putting in that same amount. So it's
Very
just a systematic approach to investing, right?
okay. It sounds like a great way if you are an emotional investor or you have some feelings about the stock market to
Yeah,
mitigate that. So that way
yeah,
you just
exactly. Right. Um, you're just putting in that set amount that you can afford to put in. And it's very important that you don't put in into any kind of investment more than you can afford, right? So,
okay.
because the last thing you want to do is have to start selling or worrying about your budgeting, right? So, because
Mhm.
again, markets will fluctuate, right? Sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down, right? So, but yeah, so as you said, Terrence, it's a great way to take the emotion out of it. You're just going to put this money in, and that's sort of what happens, like I said, in your 403b or your 401k plan.
So as we're talking about plans and reviewing them, let's
Yep.
how often should I be looking at my portfolio, honestly?
Yeah. So, what we tell people, look at it, quarterly, because things change, right? So, like, we have in this environment right now, interest rates are being cut by the Federal Reserve Bank, right? So if that will impact how your portfolios are doing, right? We just as we talked about, we just went through an election cycle, so that has impacts on your portfolio, right? And then as we get to year end, as we go into a new calendar year, they'll have some impacts on your portfolio. So I would say at least once a quarter, look at it once a year at the very minimum. But you don't need to check it daily because you're just gonna go
Stress yourself
crazy.
out. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, looking at it, right? But and if you want someone to check it daily, that's when you work with someone that can help you, like a financial professional, right? Because the other thing, as you said, you want to take the emotion out of it, right? If anytime you bring emotions into
The
the
market,
equation, yeah,
ooh, they
it's
they
yeah.
are very happy to mess with them. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I would say at least once a quarter you want to check. Not that you need to act on it, but you just want to see what's happening with the portfolios, right? Um, and then, like again, if something happens in your lifestyle, right? Like say you have a child, you get married, you switch jobs, things like that, or you got a major bonus through work or something like that. You want to then like look at what you're doing with those funds, and then check your portfolios and things like that.
Perfect segue.
Yep.
Telling me how to prepare for the unexpected, whether it is that child or maybe providing care for some loved ones. Uh, how do I manage that? What's my long-term care strategy? Oh, I'm sorry. What's my unexpected strategy?
Yeah, so and that's what we talk about like in planning, right? So um, it's good that if you're already contributing to your retirement plan, but you don't want to overfund that, like so you don't want to sacrifice like what you can do outside of those, right? So one of the things we talk about is um, having like a rainy day fund, an emergency fund, right? So we'll have that just sitting in cash. And then also this is where insurance comes into play, right? So like we talked about life insurance in case something were to happen to you that's unforeseen, and like you need to provide a benefit for your loved ones, right? So you want to think about like, do you need life insurance, and like what's a proper amount of life insurance for you? Is it term insurance or is it whole life, right? So things like that. We talked about annuities. Annuities is another way to protect your your assets, right? So if you're going to live longer than expected, an annuity would have that, right? So part of the planning process when you're talking to someone is exactly what we go through, like how to prepare for the unexpected, right?
Mhm.
Nobody wants to think about when um, something might happen to them that's a negative, right? But again, like if you're married, you have kids, you want to think about what's going to happen with your children's college education if you're not around to provide income, right? Um, if you have a mortgage, like what's going to happen to your home if you don't have that second income or that even that first income to provide for the mortgage expenses and things like that. Or if you have a business, like what happens, right? So
Mhm.
preparing for the unexpected. Um, that's another way to talk about like how do we make sure you have enough coverage, like insurance or cash or things like that, right? So
Speaking of coverage,
yeah,
I feel like we've definitely dived in and understood and started to explore what it means to prepare myself for retirement. And
yep.
I'm feeling more knowledgeable now. But also,
Okay.
if you could, tell me more about long-term care strategy and what happens when I'm actually in retirement now, and what does this mean to me?
Yeah, so a couple of things will happen. Right now, one, healthcare costs, right? Like if you're working, most likely your employer will sponsor your healthcare, well, your coverage, right? And but what happens when you retire? I know at 65, Medicare will kick in for most people if they want to apply for it, right? So that's a good way to do it. But then Medicare doesn't cover like some things like prescriptions and things like that. There are different parts to Medicare that you need to account for, right? So like if you need prescription drugs or hospital stays and things like that. I'm not a Social Security or Medicare expert, so I know enough just to be dangerous. But those are the
Mhm.
things that you need to look at. So healthcare costs is something that you want to start planning for in retirement, and then associated with that is long-term care, right? So we talked about life expectancies, and you know, as technology develops, medicine gets better, more um, uh, readily available for people, right? You're going to live longer, right? So let's just say at 65 you retire. Um, your kids don't want to take care of you as you get older, and you need some sort of long-term
They
care
better take
strategy.
care of me. I had kids for that
Yeah,
reason.
yeah. Well, you'd be surprised. Many parents don't want their kids taken care of them, right? So um, as we look at like things like long-term care, right? it becomes very expensive. And long-term care is like going to a facility or having someone come take care of you at your home, right? If that's what you want. Like
Mm.
in Massachusetts right now, it costs about um, $15,000 a month to have a long-term care,
What
like a
did you
full
say, Raj? $15,000
fifteen
per
thousand
month?
in Massachusetts, right? Like, how do you pay for that, right? And Social Security won't pay for a lot of it unless you drain all your assets, right? So, like one of the things we did for my mother is we put all her assets in a trust, right? I'm not saying this is what everyone should do, but we did that just so in case something were to happen for her, to her, my mother's 86 years old, um, she wouldn't have to liquidate all her assets to pay for long-term care, right? So but there are ways to avoid that. Like we never did that for my mother because we never just never thought about it as she was going through her earning phase of life, right? But now we do have strategies that become more commonplace, right? So you can plan for that, and so like it doesn't have to be a long-term care plan outright because those can be expensive, but there are
What
other
can I
ways
do
to.
today?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
We have 10
yep,
minutes left. I just want to give you a
sure,
quick
yep,
time check.
yeah. So these are all things that you can talk about with someone, right? I'm like I said, I'm happy to talk about it with you today, but the idea today is um, start planning as early as you can, right? But even if you feel like you don't have enough time, that's not the reason not to plan, right? You can always plan, right? So even if the plan is for 5 years or 5 months, right? You just want to have some sort of plan today. So what you want to do is start thinking about the things that we talked about today, and start thinking about what you need to do to get ahead of it, right? So
Mm.
the best thing to do is, yeah, here, put your knowledge to work, work with us, do it yourself, but whatever you do, don't put it off, right? Because it doesn't get easier. It just gets more difficult, right? And you can see on this chart, if you start planning early, like what the differences can make for the future, right? So the
What it
sooner you
looks.
start, the better off you are.
Yeah, this looks amazing. If I 3,000 annually, if I started at apparently 20 years old, that's almost what? That's over a quarter million. That's over $500,000. That's huge.
Yeah,
I love this.
right. Yeah, and like that 6% rate of return, you know, that's not hard to do, right? So um, given you're in the right, as we talked about, allocations, diversifications, things like that, right? So um, yeah,
Uh, and you know what? And that brings us towards the end of our presentation. I do want to let everybody know that if anybody has any real questions after this, please reach out to Harvard FCU.org/GradePath. They are a partner and we love working with them. They've been able to help us. And if they've honestly, if you take anything away from this presentation, from anything from me or Raj, it is GradePath. And GradePath is a great place for you to honestly speak to somebody about your specific situation. Now we're going to moving on into the questions portion of our presentation. We have about 15 minutes left. Please let us know. And thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Raj, for having us. I'm not sending anybody away. You have some time. So if you want to ask questions, you have Raj and I here for about another 10 minutes or so.
We have
yeah,
a few questions in the chat, Terrence.
Okay, let me check
Not the chat, the Q&A, sorry.
Q&A. Uh, I'm actually not able to see it on my screen. Can you?
Oh, sure. I
Oh, I got it. I'm sorry.
okay,
Oh no, I don't see anything on my screen. Can you grab them, Jen?
sure. Hi, everyone. This is Jen, and I'm just going to ask Raj the questions that we have so far. Feel free if you have any other questions to put them into the Q&A feature on Zoom. The chat is disabled. You might need to go into more to see your Q&A, so you can go ahead and go in there. Um, Starting from the most recent question, could you go over again, Raj, what are the limits for contributions into the university funded plan, the employee funded plan, and a Roth IRA for 2024?
sure. So generally, and each plan will be a little different. So at the end of this, you might want to call whoever the plan administrator is. But generally, IRS limitations are um, 23,500 for like a 403B or 401k. Unless you're age 50 or above, then you can make that contribution of of up to $7,000 for the catch-up. Roths are generally $7,000 a year, but then there are some income limitations on the Roth, right? So you want to look into that. And
And then
traditional,
if you're upper income, like over 87,000, I think, is that right?
for individuals, I believe it's around 187, and then joints like 225.
187.
Yeah. So you run into that. So if you work with a tax professional or any kind of tax software, they could spell that out for you. And then same thing with a traditional IRA, you're up 7,000 unless you're making that catch up of 7,500 if you're above the age of 50.
Thank you. And I believe if you're in the Harvard University sponsored plan, to the person asking the question, I believe it's the same as what Raj said for the 401ks. So that's my understanding. We also had a question. I just read about gold. I never thought about it, but what's your opinion on investing in something like this for inflation?
Yeah, it's not a bad place to look at, but again, as we talked about earlier, like diversification, sector allocation, all that, right? You want to have other things as well. Like you don't want to put everything just into gold, right? Because there are times when gold does lose value. There are times when gold will be a better investment than anything else that's out there, right? So to have it part of the portfolio is not a bad idea, but again, you don't want that to be the only thing that you have in your portfolio. And these are things that, like I said, I'm happy to talk to you about, walk you through it, or if you have anyone else in mind, they should be able to help you with that as well. But having diversification, like I can't stress that enough, having diversification is the best way to invest.
Yeah, that's definitely a great takeaway from this. One last question. What do you think is, I know we can't predict the future.
Yep.
Raj, what do you think is the likelihood that Social Security will be available in 20 to 30 years? Should we really be counting on that income source? So that's what this question asker would like to know.
Yeah, I wish I had the magic 8 ball to answer that question. So I touched on this earlier, like when I was back in high school, going through college, all that, they all talked about Social Security going bust, right? So, and the reason for that was we were sort of fixated on balanced budgets and not running deficits. Um, But nowadays, I don't think our politicians, our administrations, our Congress is too worried about that. And with lower rates, or rates being where they are, it doesn't cost a lot of money to borrow. So I personally think Social Security will still be around given the current environment, only because, again, we're not afraid to run deficits. But you don't want that to be your sole investment or retirement vehicle, right? You want to have other things, right? So I would use Social Security, depending on what you do for work and like what other means you have, as just gravy to what you're already doing. But that's where having that plan, talking about putting a plan together if you don't have one, and knowing what you want your retirement to look like, because I think the drivers are going to be really what you do inside of your 401k, 403b plans, and outside of those, and then Social Security is just an added benefit.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a great way to look at it. One other question has come in. This person invested in a 401k for more than 20 years at a previous company.
Mhm.
In looking at the plans we have, would it be better if I invest in the Roth plan rather than a traditional 401k? The person's 53 and they also have their own IRA account. This is kind of complicated. Maybe this
Yeah.
person should come in and talk with you.
Yeah,
But
that's a, we get
or,
this a lot.
just have a
Yeah.
phone conversation
Yeah.
even. It doesn't have to be in
Yeah.
person,
I
right?
think, yeah, we should talk about that because you have many different options and
Yeah.
there are many different parts of this, like moving money out of a 401k into a Roth. Again, I can't give tax advice, but there are tax implications to that. If you're still investing in a 401k that you're no longer participating in, I always recommend that you move that money to a traditional IRA. But again, I just don't want to give out generic responses because each case will be different. So whoever you are, if you want to come in or just reach out, we can talk about it to your specifics.
Yeah, I know
Yes.
when I've left a job, I've always rolled the 401k or 403b into a traditional IRA,
Yeah,
just because of those tax implications. I didn't want to pay a big tax penalty
right,
or,
exactly. And another,
but
yeah,
someone might be in a different situation than me, right? So,
right,
yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Any other questions, Jen?
I don't see any other questions right now. So thank you to everybody who asked your questions. I think those are all helpful, and I'm just going to pop off now.
All right, cool.
mm,
Thank you. Appreciate it. Also, if anybody is interested in making an appointment with Raj, Jen has shared that link in the chat, harvardfcu.org/invest. And that is one more thing, quick disclaimer. This has been an educational only presentation. This is not financial advice. I mean, technically it is, but it's not tax, legal, or investment advice. If you do want any information about your specific situation, please contact a certified advisor for your specific situation. And Raj is that person who can talk to you about your retirement advice. And please let us know how we did. Jen has shared the survey link in the chat. And that has been our presentation. Let's keep in touch. Raj's email is right there as well. Raj Bhanshali,
sure, yeah.
CFSinvest at harvardfcu.org. I hope I didn't butcher that, Raj. I was
No, that's
trying not
fine.
to.
Yeah, yeah, you're good.
uh,
There's a lot of letters there, so yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a
All
great
right.
day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.